Hello everybody, it's Hater. Welcome back to another Destiny 2 build video. And if Bungie thought nerfing the throwing hammer was going to stop us from making bonk builds, then they were wrong, because what we're going to be talking about in today's video is how the shield bash melee on Void 3.0 Titan is able to hit the damage display cap of 999,999. So if you guys are into that kind of thing, then show some support to the channel by giving the video a like, subscribing for whenever a new build video comes out. I'm also live over at my Twitch every single day playing more than just Destiny, and if you guys want to add this build to your arsenal, then there will be a dim loadout link down in the description. Starting things off, the way that this build is going to work, guys, is we are using the shield bash melee attack on Void 3.0 Titan to deal an extreme amount of damage via numerous damage modifiers, and trust me, there is going to be a lot of them. The first buff we're going to be talking about is Offensive Bulwark. This is going to give 100% more melee damage while we have an overshield or are inside of the Ward of Dawn super. This is going to be the foundation of our build, so keep that in mind. So what we're going to do is focus our subclass around doing so with the other aspect Bastion. This is going to change our barricade to give us constant overshield so we can get Bulwark active all the time. Moving on over to the next damage buff we're going to be using, it's going to be a shotgun with the perk 1-2 punch. What this does is whenever you hit every pellet in a shot on an enemy, it's going to increase your melee damage by 200% when we're fighting mini bosses below, and 350% when it's a boss or vehicle. These two by themselves are already going to elevate bonk damage by a lot, but with a few exotics we can absolutely break this. For the first exotic we're going to be talking about, it's gonna be the Syntheseps exotic arms. These are going to increase melee damage again by yet another 200% when there are 3 or more enemies nearby, lasting around 8 seconds. For higher tier content like Master or GM Nightfalls, these are honestly going to be the bread and butter exotic to run. And if you guys don't believe me, the clip that is playing now in the background is from the Master version of the Glassway Nightfall, and with all 3 buffs at once, Syntheseps, Overshield, and 1-2 punch, it one-shots the Overload Captain instantaneously. Moving on over to the next exotic though, if we really want to push this build to the limit, it's going to be the Worm God's Caress. Oh yeah, Worm Gods. For those who don't know, Worm God's Caress exotic perk provides stacking melee damage after getting kills with a melee. This can then be stacked up to 5 times, and at max stacks, melee attacks will deal 650% more damage. If you're picking up what I'm throwing down, this is going to make our shield bash deal outlandish amounts of damage. And I mean this to the point where we're hitting the visual damage cap of 999,999. It doesn't stop there. It doesn't stop there because, as I mentioned, it's the visual cap. This doesn't mean it ends at 1 million. It goes over 1 million. When stacking 5 Worm Gods with 1-2 punch and Offensive Bulwark, hitting Carl displays the visual damage cap, but actually he is taking over 1.7 million damage on one hit. Now, I do have my gripes with Worm Gods. I feel, even though, yes, it's a 650% damage increase, but we're not going to be able to bring this into a real scenario like GM Nightfalls, endgame raids. The only real thing that this thing fits is very niche scenarios where there are enemies and a boss at the exact same time that you can work with your team with. The only thing that comes to mind is Riven and maybe Rolk. I don't know if his Shadow Thrall disappear when you go into damage phase, but you could maybe do it with him. It would take a lot of setup, but you could do it. And speaking of real scenarios, that's going to be leading us into the next exotic and probably my favorite for this build. That's going to be the Heart of Inmost Light exotic chest piece. This exotic is probably the best for outright consistency when it comes to this build, because of its exotic perk Overflowing Light, giving our abilities energy back based on which ability is being used, and then boosting damage to those abilities that follow up after one. For example, if we use our grenade, our melee and barricade will regen faster, increase their damage, and in the case of the barricade, it will have more HP. Of course, the damage isn't as astronomical as Syntheseps or Worm's God's Caress at like 35% instead of 650, but come on, let's be honest, do we really need that much overkill when we're only going to be using those two in very, very niche scenarios? Finally, now that we've gone over all of the major exotics and how to use this build, let's talk about how we're going to set up the subclass. And to start off, for solo content, I prefer using Ward of Dawn for the extra 25% damage, but you guys can definitely trade it out for Sentinel Shield. Both will get the job done. For the grenade, of course, this is also up to preference. I use Vortex because it's really strong. It's Vortex grenade, can't really go wrong there. But for the aspects, we're using Offensive Bulwark, as I mentioned before, and then the other one is gonna be Bastion. Funny enough, we're not using Controlled Demolition in this build, mainly because Bastion is going to change our barricade, allowing us to gain overshield consistently when we lay it down. This is going to be really good because this allows us to have our overshield on demand no matter what we do. All we would have to do for the Wombo combo is lay our barricade down and then run in, slide, 1-2 punch, shield bash. It's as simple as that. But moving on over to the fragments though, we're going to be using Echo of Expulsion, so all of our abilities cause enemies to explode. This has really good synergy with volatile rounds, and especially the mod Volatile Flow in the build, since we're going to be using that. I also find this to be a really good substitute for Controlled Demolition, and definitely gets the job done. For the next fragment though, it's gonna be Echo of Starvation, allowing us to give our Titan Devour, just by picking up Orbs of Power. Easily one of the best fragments in the game, and to synergize with it, for the final fragment, we're going to use Echo of Persistence to increase the durations on both Devour and our Overshield to make them both go from 8 seconds to 15 seconds long. Easily this combo with Overshield and Devour, it's going to make our survivability go right through the roof. Now that we've gone over how the build works and how to set up your guys' subclass, let's talk about the mods that make the build. And to start off, you guys are going to need at least one piece of your armor Arc and one piece of your armor Void. Starting off at the helmet, guys, mine is going to be Arc, and we're using the mod Heavy Handed. What this does is that whenever we are charged with light, we gain half of our melee energy back every time we used our charged melee attack, consuming 1 stack of Charged with Light. Now that Charged with Light builds are technically not focused towards Protective Light anymore, we can take advantage of the much more resource dependent Charged with Light mods. Next to it though, guys, I'm using 2 Harmonic Siphon so that rapid weapon final blows with damage matching my subclass type will create Orbs of Power. This is going to mainly synergize with my funnel web in my build, as it is my main Void weapon, and I'm mainly going to be using this so that I can get Orbs of Power for Devour. Moving on over to the arms, I'm going to have these as Void, and I'm using the mod Well of Tenacity. It states picking up a Void Elemental Well is going to reduce the damage you take from combatants for a short period of time. Meaning every time we pick up a Void Elemental Well for 5 seconds, we're taking 50% reduced damage. Pretty self-explanatory, and it synergizes super well with the Devour and Overshield. Next to it though, I'm using a rocket launcher loader since I'm using a rocket launcher in my build, and bolstering detonation so that I gain class ability energy when I deal damage with my grenade. You guys are going to be noticing a trend with my armor that I am using mods that will synergize with Heart of Inmost Light so that abilities give other abilities energy on top of the exotics perk. Speaking of my Heart of Inmost Light, let's move on over to it. I have mine as Void, and I'm using the mod Elemental Ordnance at the end, so defeating enemies with my grenade will create a Void Elemental Well. This is going to be the main way we're getting those Charged with Light stacks, and also get Volatile Flow and Well of Tenacity going. Next to it though, I'm using Thermoshock Plating so I take reduced incoming solar and arc damage, and then I'm pairing that with a Void Resistance so I take reduced damage from all 3 elements. Moving on over to the boots, guys, these are also going to be Void for me, and I'm using the mod Elemental Charge at the end of it so that whenever we pick up that Void Elemental Well we're creating from Elemental Ordnance, it's going to give us 2 stacks of Charged with Light because it matches our subclass typing. It's gonna be the main way that we're gaining those stacks of charge with light so that we can spend them on heavy-handed. Next though, I'm using a rocket launcher scavenger from the artifact and absolution so that picking up an orb of power will reduce all of my abilities cooldowns. Again, another mod that will synergize with Heart of Inmost Light. Finally, moving on over to the class item, I have this as solar and I'm using the mod Volatile Flow so that picking up a Void Elemental Well will give my Void weapons volatile rounds. This is easily one of the best mods in the game to pair with any Void weapon that you're using, and you cannot go wrong with it. But next to it though guys, I'm using the mod Distribution so that I reduce all of my abilities cooldowns when I'm using my class ability near enemies. This is going to synergize super well with the playstyle of this build because what we're going to do is lay our barricade down, usually near enemies, so that we can prep the 1-2 punch combo. And then finally, I'm also going to be pairing this with a bomber so that I reduce my grenade cooldown every time I use my barricade. But anyways guys, that is going to be the build for today's video. Shield Bash is easily going to be the new hammer build that we're going to be using from now on, and by far one of my favorite builds to run right now. Either way guys, if you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them down in the comments. I hope you all enjoyed the video. I'm gonna see you guys in